February 4th, 2010. A family of 4 vanishes from their California home without a trace, leaving behind only 2 bewildered dogs and half-eaten bowls of popcorn on the living room sofa. For nearly 4 years, the disappearance of Joseph and Summer McStay and their 2 young sons becomes one of America's most baffling missing persons cases, spawning theories ranging from voluntary flight to Mexico to something far more sinister. Then, on a November day in 2013, a motorcyclist riding through the Mojave Desert makes a horrific discovery. 4 sets of human remains buried in shallow graves, their skulls crushed by blunt force trauma. The identification confirms everyone's worst fears. The McStay family didn't disappear voluntarily. They were murdered. But who would want to kill a successful fountain designer, his real estate agent wife, and their innocent children aged just 3 and 4? The answer would lead investigators to someone the family trusted completely, Joseph's own business partner, who had been helping search for the missing family while hiding the darkest of secrets. Before we dive into this case, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. This is the tragic case of the McStay family murders, a betrayal so shocking it defies comprehension. Joseph McStay had built what many would consider the American dream. At 40 years old, he owned Earth-Inspired Products, a successful company that designed and built decorative fountains for homes and businesses across Southern California. His 43-year-old wife, Summer, was a licensed real estate agent who had found love again after previous relationships that hadn't worked out. Together, they were raising 2 beautiful boys, 4-year-old Gianni and 3-year-old Joseph Jr., in their comfortable home in Fallbrook, California, a picturesque community known for its avocado groves and rural charm. The family appeared to have everything going for them. Joseph's fountain business was thriving. Summer was successfully building her real estate career, and their young sons were the center of their world. Friends and family described them as devoted parents who rarely spent time apart from their children. They were homebodies who preferred quiet family dinners to nights out on the town, making what happened next all the more inexplicable. February 4th, 2010, started like any other day for the McStay family. There were no apparent signs of distress, no family emergencies, and no obvious reasons why this particular Thursday would be any different from countless others. Joseph went about his usual business activities, communicating with clients and managing his fountain projects. Summer tended to the children and handled her real estate responsibilities. But something changed that evening. At exactly 7:47 p.m., a neighbor's surveillance camera captured footage that would become crucial evidence in the investigation to come. The camera recorded the bottom 18 inches of what investigators believed to be the family's 1996 Isuzu Trooper leaving their driveway. The footage was frustratingly limited. The camera angle prevented any view of the vehicle's occupants, leaving investigators to wonder who was driving and whether the entire family was inside. Less than an hour later, at 8:28 p.m., Joseph's cell phone made what would be the final call from his device. The call went to the voicemail of Charles Chase Merritt, Joseph's business partner and close friend. Merritt would later tell police that he was watching a movie and chose to ignore the call, planning to return it later. He never got the chance. Joseph's phone pinged a cell tower in Fallbrook, confirming he was still in the local area when the call was made. What happened in the hours and days that followed would baffle investigators and torment the McStay family's loved ones for years to come. The family simply vanished, as if they had stepped out of their normal lives and into thin air. There were no goodbye calls to relatives, no social media posts indicating travel plans, and no obvious signs that they had been planning to leave home for an extended period. Inside their house, investigators would later discover signs of an interrupted evening. A carton of eggs sat abandoned on the kitchen counter, suggesting meal preparations that were never completed. 2 small bowls of popcorn remained on the living room sofa, the children's evening snack left untouched. The family's 2 dogs were found wandering in the backyard, confused and hungry, waiting for owners who would never return. The first signs that something was seriously wrong came from the people who knew the McStay family best. Over the next several days following their disappearance, relatives and friends made increasingly frantic attempts to contact Joseph, Summer, and the children. Phone calls went unanswered, text messages remained unread, and emails bounced back without responses. For a family that maintained regular contact with their loved ones, this silence was deeply alarming. Joseph's brother Michael became particularly concerned when his calls continued to go straight to voicemail. The McStay brothers spoke regularly about business matters and family life, and Joseph's sudden unavailability was completely out of character. After more than a week without any contact, Michael decided to take action. On February 13th, he drove to the family's Fallbrook home to check on them personally. What Michael found when he arrived at the house only deepened his concern. The property appeared abandoned, with no signs of recent activity. Unable to get anyone to answer the door, Michael walked around to the back of the house and discovered an open window. Fearing the worst, he climbed through the window to gain entry to the home, calling out for his brother and sister-in-law as he searched each room. The house was empty. Michael found the family's two dogs in the backyard, clearly distressed and showing signs that they hadn't been properly cared for in days. Inside the home, everything appeared relatively normal except for those telling signs of an interrupted evening. The eggs on the counter, the untouched popcorn bowls, and an overall sense that the family had simply stepped away and never returned. Unable to locate his brother's family and increasingly worried about their safety, Michael contacted the San Diego County Sheriff's Department on February 15th to report them missing. Deputies responded to the home and quickly recognized that this was no ordinary missing persons case. The combination of the abandoned dogs, the signs of interrupted daily activities, and the family's complete disappearance without explanation suggested something more serious than a spontaneous trip or family emergency. Law enforcement requested and obtained a search warrant for the McStay residence, which was executed on February 19, 2010. The formal search confirmed what Michael had already observed. There were no obvious signs of a struggle or violent crime, but clear indications that the family had left hastily and unexpectedly. As investigators began piecing together the timeline of the family's last known activities, they made a discovery that would significantly complicate their investigation. The McStay family's 1996 Isuzu Trooper had been found abandoned in a strip mall parking lot in San Isidro, near the Mexican border. The vehicle had been towed on February 8th at approximately 11 p.m., after being parked in the lot for several hours. This discovery immediately raised questions about the family's intentions and destination, and would lead investigators down a path that would consume years of investigation time. For 3.5 years, the McStay family case remained one of California's most perplexing mysteries. Despite extensive investigation, media coverage, and public interest, no credible trace of Joseph, Summer, Gianni, or Joseph Jr. had been found. The family had seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving investigators with theories but no concrete answers. Then, on November 11, 2013, a motorcyclist riding through the remote Mojave Desert near Victorville, California, made a discovery that would finally provide the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. While exploring the vast, desolate landscape approximately 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles, the rider noticed what appeared to be human bones protruding from the desert floor in an area where few people ever ventured. The discovery site was remarkably isolated, located in a barren stretch of desert accessible only by rough dirt roads. The area was so remote that it likely would never have been searched systematically, and the remains might have stayed hidden indefinitely if not for the chance encounter. The motorcyclist immediately contacted local authorities, who dispatched investigators to secure the scene and begin the delicate process of recovery and identification. What investigators found at the site was both heartbreaking and horrifying. 4 sets of human remains were buried in 2 shallow graves, clearly the victims of homicide rather than natural death or accident. The bones showed obvious signs of trauma, and the arrangement of the graves suggested this was a deliberate attempt to conceal evidence of murder. The remote location had been carefully chosen by someone who wanted to ensure the bodies would never be found. Patrick McStay, Joseph's father, received the devastating phone call that every family member of a missing person dreads but secretly expects. He was informed of the discovery and asked to provide DNA samples and other information that could help with identification. Patrick immediately contacted missing person advocate Jerry Dean, who had been following the case and helping to keep public attention focused on finding the family. The formal identification process began immediately, but investigators already suspected these were the remains of the McStay family. The number of bodies, 2 adults and 2 children, matched the missing family composition perfectly. The location, while far from where the family had disappeared, was consistent with someone who knew the area well enough to select an isolated burial site. 2 days after the discovery, on November 13, 2013, the San Bernardino County Coroner's Office officially confirmed what everyone had feared. The remains were those of Joseph McStay, Summer McStay, 4-year-old Gianni, and 3-year-old Joseph Jr. The identification brought a tragic end to years of hoping the family might still be alive somewhere, while simultaneously opening a homicide investigation that would seek justice for their murders. The cause of death determination was as brutal as it was definitive. All 4 family members had died from blunt force trauma to their heads, killed by repeated strikes from what investigators believed to be a sledgehammer or similar heavy weapon. The violence of their deaths stood in stark contrast to the peaceful family life they had been living, and raised immediate questions about who could have committed such a horrific crime against innocent children and their parents. The discovery transformed the case from a missing persons investigation into a murder inquiry, with investigators now focused on identifying and prosecuting the person or persons responsible for this devastating family annihilation. The identification of the McStay family's remains immediately shifted the investigation's focus from finding missing persons to solving a quadruple homicide. Investigators now knew they were looking for someone capable of murdering an entire family, including 2 young children, and sophisticated enough to conceal the crime for nearly 4 years. The brutality of the murders, all 4 victims killed by blunt force trauma to their heads, suggested this was personal, committed by someone the family knew and trusted. As detectives re-examined every aspect of the original investigation with fresh eyes, one name continued to surface repeatedly: Charles Chase Merritt, Joseph's business partner and the last known person to have contact with the family. Merritt had been cooperative during the initial missing persons investigation, even helping with search efforts and appearing in media interviews expressing concern for his missing friend and business associate. But investigators began noticing troubling inconsistencies in Merritt's statements and behavior. While he had publicly supported the theory that the family had fled to Mexico voluntarily, investigators discovered evidence that painted a very different picture of Merritt's activities in the days following the murders. Bank records revealed that Merritt had written checks totaling more than $21,000 from Joseph's business account between February 5 and February 10, 2010, just days after the family disappeared. Even more damning was what Merritt did with the stolen money. Surveillance footage from several local casinos showed him gambling away thousands of dollars in the weeks following the murders, behavior that seemed inconsistent with someone genuinely concerned about his missing business partner. Investigators learned that Merritt had a serious gambling addiction that had put him in significant financial trouble, providing a clear motive for the murders. The breakthrough in the case came when advanced DNA analysis techniques were applied to evidence collected from the family's abandoned Isuzu Trooper. Despite the vehicle having been processed years earlier, new technology allowed forensic scientists to extract DNA profiles from trace evidence that had previously been inconclusive. The results were devastating for Merritt. His DNA was found inside the vehicle, placing him definitively at the scene. Further investigation revealed the methodical nature of Merritt's crimes: Cell phone records showed that Merritt's phone had been in the area where the family's vehicle was abandoned near the Mexican border on February 8, 2010. This evidence contradicted his previous statements about his whereabouts and activities during the crucial time period following the murders. Investigators also discovered the murder weapon buried with Summer McStay and her youngest son, a 3-pound sledgehammer that forensic analysis linked to the fatal injuries suffered by all 4 victims. The presence of the weapon in the grave suggested that the killer had attempted to dispose of evidence along with the bodies, but had underestimated the persistence of forensic science and investigative techniques. The case against Merritt became even stronger when investigators examined his financial situation more closely. Records showed that he was facing significant debts and had been struggling to keep his own business afloat. Joseph's successful fountain company represented both a source of immediate cash through embezzlement and a potential long-term solution to Merritt's financial problems if he could gain control of the business. On November 5, 2014, nearly 4 years after the murders and almost exactly 1 year after the bodies were discovered, San Bernardino County Sheriff's detectives arrested Charles Chase Merritt at his home. The arrest marked the beginning of a legal process that would seek justice for Joseph, Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr., while finally providing answers to the family members and friends who had spent years wondering what happened to their loved ones. The arrest of Charles Chase Merritt brought both relief and renewed anguish to the McStay family's survivors. While they finally had answers about who was responsible for the murders, the legal process ahead would force them to relive the trauma repeatedly as prosecutors sought justice for Joseph, Summer, and the 2 innocent children. Merritt was charged with 4 counts of murder, and the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office announced they would seek the death penalty given the particularly heinous nature of the crimes. The case against Merritt was built on a foundation of DNA evidence, financial records, cell phone data, and circumstantial evidence that painted a clear picture of betrayal and premeditated murder. However, the path to justice proved to be lengthy and complicated. Merritt's trial was repeatedly delayed as he cycled through multiple defense attorneys, sometimes firing them and other times attempting to represent himself. By February 2016, he had gone through 5 different attorneys, causing frustration for both prosecutors and the victims' families who were eager to see the case resolved. The trial finally began on January 7, 2019, nearly 9 years after the murders occurred. The prosecution presented compelling evidence of Merritt's financial motive, his opportunity to commit the crimes, and the physical evidence linking him to the murders. They argued that Merritt had killed the family in their home using the sledgehammer, then transported their bodies to the remote desert location where he buried them in shallow graves. The defense attempted to raise reasonable doubt by suggesting alternative theories and questioning the reliability of some forensic evidence. However, the combination of DNA evidence, financial records showing Merritt's embezzlement, and cell phone data placing him at key locations proved overwhelming. On June 10, 2019, the jury reached their verdict. Charles Chase Merritt was found guilty on all 4 counts of murder. The conviction brought a sense of closure to the McStay family's survivors, though it could never fully heal the wounds left by such a devastating loss. 2 weeks later, on June 24th, the same jury recommended that Merritt be sentenced to death, finding that the aggravating circumstances of the murders, including the killing of children and multiple victims, outweighed any mitigating factors. On January 21, 2020, the court formally sentenced Merritt to death, though California's moratorium on capital punishment means the sentence may never be carried out. The case had a profound impact on the community and law enforcement practices. It demonstrated the importance of preserving evidence even in cases that initially appear to be missing persons rather than homicides. The successful prosecution also showcased how advances in DNA analysis technology can breathe new life into cold cases, providing justice years after crimes are committed. For the McStay family's survivors, the conviction provided some measure of closure, though the pain of losing Joseph, Summer, Gianni, and Joseph Jr. will never fully heal. The case serves as a tragic reminder of how trust can be betrayed in the most devastating ways possible. The McStay family murders represent one of the most heartbreaking betrayals in modern criminal history. Joseph McStay trusted Charles Merritt not just as a business partner, but as a close friend who was welcome in his family's home and around his precious children. That trust became the weapon that Merritt used to destroy 4 innocent lives, all for the sake of stealing money to feed his gambling addiction. This case serves as a stark reminder that evil can hide behind familiar faces and friendly smiles. The person who helped search for the missing family, who appeared in media interviews expressing concern and hope, was the same person who had brutally murdered them and buried their bodies in the desert. It challenges our fundamental assumptions about human nature and the people we choose to trust with our lives and families. The investigation itself demonstrates both the limitations and the power of modern forensic science. For nearly 4 years, the case remained unsolved despite extensive investigation and media attention. It was only through advances in DNA analysis technology and the persistent work of dedicated investigators that justice was finally achieved. The case shows how patience, scientific advancement, and investigative persistence can eventually overcome even the most carefully planned crimes. Perhaps most importantly, this case reminds us of the preciousness of family bonds and the devastating ripple effects when those bonds are violently severed. Joseph and Summer McStay were building a life together, raising their young sons with love and dedication. 4-year-old Gianni and 3-year-old Joseph Jr. had their entire futures ahead of them, full of possibilities that were cruelly cut short by someone they had been taught to trust. The McStay family's story continues to resonate because it represents every parent's worst nightmare, that someone close to the family could pose the greatest threat to their children's safety. Their memory lives on in the continued efforts to improve missing persons investigations and in the reminder that we must cherish our loved ones while we have them. If this case moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigative stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How can we better protect our families while still maintaining the trust and openness that makes life worth living? Sometimes the most important lessons come from the darkest chapters in human experience.